The cannons thundered, the drums rolled. And in the heart of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, a figure stood defiant against tradition. On December 2nd, 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. In that single act, he declared to the world that he was a man who owed his throne to no one but himself. It was the gesture of a soldier who had risen from obscurity on a small Mediterranean island to the ruler of Europe, reshaping the destiny of nations. Napoleon's life is the tale of ambition unbound, of genius and willpower colliding with the tides of history. He was a master of strategy, a builder of empires, a reformer who modernized nations, and yet also a conqueror whose relentless wars cost millions of lives. To some, he was a tyrant. To others, a hero. But none can deny that he left the world transformed. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769, in Ajaccio, on the island of Corsica. Just months earlier, Corsica had been annexed by France from the Republic of Genoa, meaning Napoleon was technically French by birth, though he always considered himself Corsican at heart. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer with ties to Corsican nationalism, while his mother, Letizia, was a strict and resilient woman who instilled discipline and ambition in her many children. The young Napoleon was not born into great wealth or privilege, but through his father's connections, he secured a scholarship to study in mainland France. At the age of 9, he left Corsica for the Royal Military Academy at Brienne. He spoke French poorly at first, mocked for his accent and Corsican identity, but he compensated with fierce determination. Books became his refuge, especially histories of Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Charlemagne, whose shadows he would one day step into. Napoleon's brilliance in mathematics made him well suited for artillery, the most scientific branch of the military. After completing his studies at the École Militaire in Paris, he became a second lieutenant of artillery in 1785. At just 16, he was an officer in the French army, but the winds of revolution were soon to blow across France, and with them came opportunity. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, the old order crumbled. For ambitious young officers like Napoleon, merit suddenly mattered more than birth. His skills and daring soon earned him attention. In 1793, during the siege of Toulon, he played a decisive role in retaking the city from royalist forces supported by the British. At only 24, he was promoted to brigadier general. Napoleon's meteoric rise continued. In 1796, he was given command of the French army of Italy. What followed was a campaign that stunned Europe. Facing larger Austrian and Piedmontese forces, Napoleon outmaneuvered them with lightning speed, striking where least expected. His soldiers, ragged and underfed, adored him, for he shared their hardships and led them to victory after victory. By the age of 26, Napoleon was a national hero. His dispatches from Italy were not just reports of battles, but propaganda masterpieces, carefully crafted to build his legend. He was no longer just a general, he was becoming a symbol of revolutionary France's strength. In 1798, Napoleon turned his gaze eastward, convinced the Directory, France's ruling government, to let him lead an expedition to Egypt. The official aim was to strike at British interests, but Napoleon also dreamed of emulating Alexander the Great. The campaign was a mixture of brilliance and disaster. Napoleon won the Battle of the Pyramids, defeating the Mamluks with modern tactics. Yet the British Navy, under Admiral Nelson, destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, trapping Napoleon in Egypt. Still, the expedition left a remarkable legacy. Napoleon brought scholars and scientists who studied ancient ruins, producing the monumental description de l'Egypte and discovering the Rosetta Stone, which later unlocked the secrets of hieroglyphics. By 1799, sensing political chaos back in France, Napoleon abandoned his army and returned home. His timing was perfect. France was in crisis. The revolution had left the nation unstable, and the Directory was weak and corrupt. Napoleon, already adored by the army and the public, seized the moment. On November 9, 1799, 18 Brumaire, in the revolutionary calendar, he staged a coup, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate with himself as first consul. Though cloaked in revolutionary ideals, Napoleon's rule was effectively a dictatorship, yet it was one that brought order. He reformed the administration, stabilized the economy, and reconciled with the Catholic Church. Most famously, he introduced the Napoleonic Code, a system of laws that enshrined equality before the law, property rights, and secular authority. This code spread far beyond France, influencing legal systems around the world to this day. Napoleon's power grew with each passing year. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French, symbolically declaring that he owed his authority to no one, not even the Pope. France, once a monarchy, then a republic, was now an empire. His empire was not just built on titles, but on conquest. The Napoleonic Wars would dominate the next decade of European history, with Napoleon leading his armies across the continent. His enemies derisively called him the Corsican ogre, but his soldiers saw him as the little corporal, a commander who shared their struggles and victories. Napoleon's campaigns became legendary. At Austerlitz in 1805, often called his greatest victory, he defeated the combined forces of Austria and Russia with brilliant tactics. At Jena in 1806, he crushed Prussia. By 1807, much of continental Europe was under his control, either as conquered territories or allied states. He reorganized Germany, dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, and placed his relatives on thrones across Europe: his brother Joseph in Spain, his brother Louis in Holland, his brother Me in Westphalia. Yet with each victory his ambitions grew. With ambition came overreach. In 1808, Napoleon invaded Spain, placing his brother Joseph on the throne. But the Spanish people rose in fierce resistance, supported by British forces under the Duke of Wellington. The guerrilla war drained French resources and morale, earning Spain the nickname the Spanish Ulcer. It was a lesson that even the mightiest armies could falter against the will of a determined people. Napoleon's greatest blunder came in 1812. Frustrated with Russia's defiance of his continental system of blockade, designed to weaken Britain, he launched a massive invasion of Russia. With over 600,000 men, it was the largest army Europe had ever seen. At first, the Russians retreated, burning their own lands to deny Napoleon supplies. After the costly Battle of Borodino, Napoleon entered Moscow, only to find it abandoned and set aflame. With winter closing in and supplies dwindling, he was forced to retreat. The Russian winter, disease, and starvation decimated his army. Fewer than 100,000 men made it back. The Russian campaign shattered Napoleon's aura of invincibility. Napoleon's enemies seized the opportunity. A coalition of Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria united against him. In 1814, after a series of defeats, Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to the island of Elba. Astonishingly, less than a year later, he escaped and returned to France. The people rallied to him. For 100 days, Napoleon regained power, raising an army once more, but Europe was ready. On June 18, 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, he faced the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian army. Despite moments of brilliance, Napoleon was decisively defeated. This time, the victors would not risk another return. He was exiled to the remote island of Saint Helena in the South Atlantic, far from Europe's shores. On Saint Helena, Napoleon lived under constant surveillance, his health declining. He spent his days dictating his memoirs, defending his legacy, and walking the island with his few loyal companions. Cut off from power, he reflected on his life, often portraying himself as a man of destiny, undone by fate and betrayal. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon died at the age of 51. Causes debated: stomach cancer, arsenic poisoning, but his legend was already secure. He was buried on Saint Helena, but in 1840 his remains were returned to Paris, where they now rest under the grand dome of Les Invalides. Napoleon's legacy is vast and complex. He redrew the map of Europe, spread revolutionary ideals, and reformed administration, education, and law. The Napoleonic Code remains one of his most enduring achievements, shaping modern legal systems from Europe to Latin America. Yet his wars also brought immense suffering. Millions died across Europe in campaigns that often served his personal ambition as much as France's glory. He was both a visionary and a tyrant, a reformer and a conqueror. But perhaps that is why his story endures. Napoleon was larger than life, a man who rose from obscurity to shape an age, embodying both the promise and peril of human ambition. Facts about Napoleon. Napoleon was not unusually short. He was about 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 7, average for his time. He crowned himself emperor to show he owed his power to no one, not even the Pope, despite being a conqueror, he once said. A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon, reflecting his insight into human motivation. He was a workaholic, often dictating to multiple secretaries at once, and sleeping only a few hours a night. Napoleon loved books, and had a personal library of over 3,000 volumes, often taking books on campaign. He married Deborna, a widow with children, but later divorced her because she could not produce an heir. His second wife, Marie Louise of Austria, was the daughter of the Emperor of Austria, once his enemy. Napoleon established the modern French banking system and created the Banque de France. His influence extended to everyday life. He standardized weights and measures and even influenced modern street numbering. His famous quote, "Impossible is a word to be found only in the dictionary of fools," captures his boundless determination. Napoleon Bonaparte's life was a whirlwind journey from the windswept island of Corsica to the throne of Europe. From the glory of Austerlitz to the desolation of Saint Helena. His story reminds us of the heights human ambition can reach and the depths to which it can fall. He was not perfect, far from it. He was flawed, driven by insatiable ambition, and at times ruthless. But he was also brilliant, visionary, and courageous. He dared to dream on a scale few ever have, and though he ultimately fell, he left behind a world forever changed. Napoleon's life is not just history, it is a lesson. It tells us that greatness is not merely about victory or power, but about daring to shape the world in the image of one's vision. His legacy endures not because he never failed, but because he lived with such intensity that his name still echoes across centuries. From the boy of Ajaccio to the emperor of the French, Napoleon Bonaparte's story is one that will never be forgotten.